Hello, my Build 1000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with another Mr. Nightmare. This one's titled 3 Terrifying True Spring Horror Stories. I'm excited to get in today's video. I want to hear some horror stories about spring. It's been awful. I've been sick most of it. It's done nothing but fucking rain. I know. Spring showers bring Mayflowers and whatnot. But damn. I need to build a boat. Alright. I'm excited to get in today's video. Hopefully you guys are excited as I am. If you are, please go ahead, turn them lights down low, put on something comfy, cup of something special. Let's get spooky. I didn't mess up this video. Oh, I messed up the watcher video like 5 times.
I'm a single guy in my mid-30s.
I promise, I do know how to do YouTube.
This happened a few years ago during a somewhat depressing period in my life.
Oh.
I had just broken up with my girlfriend of 5 years. The girl I thought I'd be marrying one day and starting a family with.
Oh.
It's safe to say I was pretty lost at that time. I can't lie, the psychological damage of the breakup was pretty severe. I spent entire weeks sulking and forgetting to take care of myself. I'd wake up, talk to no one, go to work, talk to no one, and come home to spend the rest of the day in bed. The weekends were even worse. I'd forget to eat, and I wouldn't leave the house. I'd binge watch movie after mind-numbing movie, not even realizing what I was watching half the time. But enough with the sob story. I'm much better now, although I still often think about the life I could have had if things went differently. Anyway, it was a Saturday night. I was slumped on the couch, barely moving except to hit play on another random movie. I couldn't even tell you what it was. Just another mindless action flick I'd forget about by the time it ended. For context, I was in my room, which is on the second floor of my house. I have a couch and a TV in my bedroom, so I typically never watch TV anywhere else but there. At one point, I looked down at my phone. It was a few minutes after 9 p.m. I remember that distinctly because my mom was calling me for like the 4th time that day. I didn't want to ignore her, but I let it ring out anyway. I knew she meant well, but I couldn't bring myself to talk. I didn't want to hear the usual questions about whether I'd eaten or gone outside. Eventually, I got tired of whatever was playing and backed out to the menu. I wasn't really in the mood for anything, but I clicked on some random horror movie I'd never heard of. It was one of those generic ones with a grainy thumbnail. I figured I'd half watch it until I fell asleep. About 20 minutes in, I realized the movie was even worse than I expected. The audio was a mess. Every time someone talked, I had to turn the volume way up just to catch a word or two. And then the next sound effect would blast through the speakers and damn near rupture my eardrums. For whatever reason though, I kept the movie on. I think it was just because I was too lazy to change it again. At some point, I started noticing this weird sound effect in the movie. It was this sharp, metallic clang, kind of like a pipe hitting concrete. It didn't match anything that was happening on the screen. No one was holding metal, and no one was in a warehouse or anything like that, and it wasn't timed with the scares either. It would just show up every minute or so, like the director had accidentally looped it or something. Same exact sound, same volume, and same pitch. It was almost too consistent to be a coherent sound design choice.
That's weird.
That plus the fact that the rest of the audio was mixed so poorly made me question how the movie had even made it to streaming platforms. The poor quality of the movie actually made it harder to turn off, partly because I was enjoying criticizing it, but also partly because I needed to see how something so terrible would play out. About halfway through,
all been there.
I got up to use the bathroom, and for whatever reason, I actually paused the movie instead of not caring enough about what was going on. When I got back and sat down, I grabbed the remote and hovered over the play button, but right as I was about to press it, I heard that sound again. That same sharp metallic clang, except this time, the movie was paused. I froze for a second, just staring at the screen. No audio, no movement, but the sound had been clear as day, and it had come from somewhere inside the house. That's when it clicked. It had never been part of the movie. I stayed completely still, trying to make sure I hadn't imagined it. I watched the paused screen and just listened, hoping my mind had just been playing a trick on me.
Fuck that shit, bro.
But then, about 45 seconds later, there it was again. The exact same clang. I didn't waste another second. I immediately jumped up, grabbed a knife from my desk, and started moving room to room, frantically checking every place someone could possibly be hiding.
Murder, death,
Every
kill
room
up
in the
this
house
bitch.
was clear, though. There was no one.
Attic?
In
You have an
fact,
attic?
there were no signs that anything was out of place either. But as I walked back up the stairs with my heart still pounding, I heard the clang again. It wasn't as loud this time, meaning it must have been coming from my room, where I had been watching the movie. But I had been sitting there the whole time, so that didn't make any sense. That's when it hit me. I had a few windows open. It was spring, and the weather had finally started warming up, so I'd gotten into the habit of cracking them in the evenings to let some air in. I started thinking maybe the sound wasn't coming from inside the house at all. Maybe it had been coming from right outside the house this whole time. I don't know why, but that thought scared me even more. I went over to the window and pushed the curtain aside just enough to get a look at the backyard, and there it was. One of the deck chairs was sitting out in the middle of the lawn, maybe 20 feet from the house, and standing next to the chair was a kid, a young kid. I couldn't really make out any of his facial features given that it was so dark out, but the silhouette was way too small to be an adult. It was 100% a little kid.
A little person.
He was holding what looked like a PVC pipe, which explained the noise I had been hearing. He must have seen me, because as soon as I looked out the window, he smacked the pipe against the chair. I instantly stepped away from the window and felt my body start filling with fear. I know it sounds silly that I was afraid of something like that.
No, that's some Children of the Corn shit right there, bro. Fuck that. Nah, homie. Little bro. Look. You want me to call your parents? Is that what you need? You can't be here, man. Like, you're creepy as fuck. I'm gonna shoot you in the face because you stand there like some Children of the Corn shit, man. And I've been watching a fucked up movie. Just saying. I ain't got nothing left for her. My old lady just left me. Man, this little kid got death wish.
But I couldn't fathom what that kid was doing outside my house. Did he have some kind of mental disorder? It didn't make sense. And then I thought about the fact that he must have been standing out there for nearly an hour, which freaked me out even more. I tried to slow my breathing and think rationally. Maybe the kid was lost. Maybe he had wandered off from a nearby house and didn't know how to get back. I told myself I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. So I went down the stairs and made my way through the house toward the back door, trying to keep calm. I even turned on the porch light, thinking it might help the kid feel less spooked, or at least give me a better look at him. As I was turning the doorknob, I froze. Something about it felt wrong, like I was walking into some kind of trap.
No, definitely.
If that kid were really lost, wouldn't he ring my doorbell or call out to me through my window? And even if he were too scared to, and ultimately decided that banging a pipe against one of my chairs was the best option, would he really stick to that strategy after a whole hour? It was insane. Something in my gut told me not to go outside.
Is it your pipe?
I slowly backed away from the door. I crept over to a small window just left of the door, one that overlooked the porch and part of the backyard. I kept the light off behind me and slowly tilted the blind with 2 fingers, just enough to see through without drawing attention, and there they were. There were 2 men wearing all black, crouching below my back door, as if ready to ambush me the second I opened it. I must have stared too long, because one of the men suddenly turned his head and locked eyes with me through the glass. I dropped the blinds and instantly dialed 911. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard banging on the back door. Those guys were trying to break in. I sprinted to my bathroom and locked the door. By that point, I was having a full-on panic attack. I felt like I couldn't move. I was struggling to breathe, honestly. Shortly after I got to the bathroom, I heard a crash from downstairs, followed by the sound of footsteps walking around below me. Those people were in my house. I heard a set of footsteps walking up the stairs, and I held my breath as they made their way down the hall. I saw the bathroom doorknob turn ever so slightly, followed by a loud bang, like they were trying to kick the door down. That made me lose it. I yelled at the top of my lungs that the police were on their way, and the person on the other side of the door instantly ran back down the stairs. A few seconds later, I heard one of the doors slam, then silence. The police arrived shortly after that, and I told them everything. There wasn't much they could do. I didn't have any cameras, and I wasn't even able to give them any valuable information. The one thing that made them take things a little more seriously was the fact that there was a child involved. According to the police, that kind of involvement suggested whoever these guys were, they weren't just impulsive criminals. They were willing to go way further, and that was the scariest part for me too.
Fuck yeah.
I don't like thinking about the poor kid's involvement in the whole thing.
Whew.
Every explanation I came up with is equally sickening. The police told me I was likely the target of a random attack, but the whole scheme was just way too elaborate, in my opinion. Nothing has happened since, though, and I've since moved on with my life. I just really hope that kid is somehow safe, even though I know the odds are slim.
Hold on 1 second, everyone. Be right back. Okay. Like I said, I just cut my grass yesterday, and there's people cutting my grass today for some reason. Whatever. Whatever.
It's currently 2024 as I'm writing this.
Whatever.
I'm a senior and I'm graduating in a couple weeks. Let me give you all a very brief rant. I never understood how most of my friends could survive a whole week-long spring break trip to Miami or some other party destination. I simply can't. So for every year of college, spring break was an excuse for me to just go home and relax. This past spring break was no different. I'd essentially be going off the grid for a week, taking a break from grueling schoolwork and mindless drama. I was actually really pissed because I had been working on a flawless regrade request for a midterm I'd just taken, and my scummy TA denied it for no good reason. But anyway, it was a Monday morning. I didn't really have any plans, just needed to get a workout in, but that was about it. I've always been a morning workout guy. It's the one thing that makes me feel like I have my life together.
Get your blood
So
pumping
even though I was
before
home for spring
the
break
day
and
starts.
technically
I
had
got you.
nothing to do, I still set my alarm for 6 a.m. and forced myself out of bed. I figured if I got to the gym early enough, I could beat the rush. By 6:20, I was already dressed, out the door, and on the road. The drive to the gym takes about 15 minutes, mostly back roads through quiet residential neighborhoods. Nothing ever really happens out there. It was definitely a nice place to grow up in, but a little boring once I got older and all my childhood friends started moving on with their lives. I was driving along listening to some YouTube beats when something strange caught my eye. There was an ice cream truck parked along the curb, just sitting there, engine off, no lights. That wouldn't have been weird in the summer, I guess, but this was mid-March. It was still kind of chilly out. All the kids were still in school too. There was no reason for an ice cream truck to be sitting there at 6:30 in the morning. It looked completely out of place. As I drove past the truck, I slowed down just enough to glance through the driver's window. It was empty. By the time I turned the corner and left it behind, I found myself thinking more about it than I should have. I don't know why. The sight just felt a little bizarre. It wasn't just that it was too early in the year for ice cream trucks. It was that I couldn't remember ever even seeing one in my neighborhood at all. Not even when I was a kid. My area just wasn't that kind of place. As weird as the whole thing was, I quickly dismissed it and proceeded with my workout. After the gym, I got a quick bite to eat and headed home, feeling like I'd actually done something with my morning. But as I turned onto the same street from earlier, the ice cream truck was still there, in the same exact spot. That made me pause. I figured someone would have called it in by now. This is the kind of neighborhood where people are really uptight and get twitchy if you park too long in front of their house. That actually reminds me of a time when some
Either a
grumpy
sting
woman gave my
operation
friends
or
and
a
I
pedo.
crap for parking in front of her house. even though we were waiting for our other friend who lived right next door. I say that to say that I'm not crazy for expecting someone to have called the police about the truck. Curiosity got the better of me. Instead of heading straight home, I circled around the block to pass the truck again, just to see if someone was inside it now, and someone was. As I drove past the second time, I must have been a little too obvious with how slowly I was driving, because the guy in the front seat locked eyes with me for a few seconds. He looked really off. He had this long, almost cartoonishly pointed nose and a scraggly beard that looked like it hadn't seen a razor in years. He genuinely looked like someone who lived in his vehicle, and it rubbed me the wrong way. I drove straight home after that. My parents were both at work, so I had the place to myself. I spent the next few hours just killing time. Sometime in the afternoon, I walked down the driveway to check the mail. As I got to the end of the driveway, I glanced down the street and nearly died inside. It was that same ice cream truck from before. It was parked across the street, about 3 houses down. It wasn't facing me, but I had a feeling it wasn't just a coincidence. I didn't move for a second. I just stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Had that guy really followed me home? I knew he had.
Most definitely.
There was no other explanation. I grabbed the mail and walked straight back inside, trying not to make it obvious that I'd seen anything. Once I was upstairs, though, I went to one of the guest bedrooms. There's a window that overlooks the street from a better angle, so I pulled the curtain aside and peeked through. Sure enough, the ice cream truck was still there. I watched it for a few minutes, but nothing happened. I'm not sure what I expected to see, but I couldn't bring myself to look away. Eventually, I had no choice. I didn't have all day to spend staring out a window, so I tried to get some stuff done on my laptop. I couldn't focus, though. Every half hour or so, I'd feel the urge to go back to the guest room and glance out the window.
Fuck that shit, bro.
Every time I looked, the
I call
ice
the
cream truck was
police.
still visible, but it was in a different spot.
Call the fucking police. Have them be like, look, there's this ice cream truck that's been sitting here for a minute. Would you care to send out like an officer to see what's going on? Like I seen them at one place and then I drove home and now they're kind of sitting precariously. Would you just please this? I mean, it's their fucking job. You know what I mean? It's their fucking job. Call the police, people.
Which
what
meant
they
the
get paid to
driver
do.
was intentionally moving around the street for whatever reason. I didn't know whether it was a good idea to call the police or not.
Yeah, it's always a
I
good
wasn't
idea.
sure what I'd even say, given that nothing had actually happened. Even now, I wish that I had just done what any normal person would have done and either called the police or tried to ignore the truck, but I was too curious. My older brother is really into bird watching, so I started digging around his room for a set of binoculars I knew was in there somewhere. Eventually, I found them and returned to the guest room. I pulled the curtains aside and looked at the truck through the binoculars. I was not prepared for what I was about to see.
Him looking back at you
Through
with
the
binoculars.
driver's side window, I could see that man from earlier, only he wasn't just sitting there. He was looking back at me with a pair of his own binoculars. As soon as he saw me looking, he instantly dropped the binoculars, started the truck, and drove off. I was horrified. That guy had been spying on me and my house for the better part of 3 hours after literally stalking me home. That's when I finally called the police. I didn't even know what I was expecting from it. I just didn't know what else to do. I told them that this ice cream truck had been circling my neighborhood all day, that I'd seen a man inside watching my house through binoculars, and that he drove off the second I looked back. The dispatcher was calm and told me they'd send someone to patrol the area and keep an eye out. She told me it should be relatively easy to spot an ice cream truck given how distinctive they were. Then she hung up. I didn't know what else to do after that. When my parents got home a little while later, I filled them in. They were obviously concerned, but they also told me it probably wasn't worth worrying about anymore. I was pretty tired by then, so I fell asleep pretty quickly. Sometime later, I woke randomly in the middle of the night. Instinctively, I grabbed my phone off my nightstand. It was sometime just after 3 a.m. I sat there in bed, trying to figure out what had woken me up, when I heard it.
Ice cream dude.
Music. It was very faint, almost too faint to notice at first. I kept listening, and panic started.
Anyone else get a little smile when they hear that song, man? I love ice cream trucks, bro. The Ninja Turtle ice creams where the eyeballs are bubble gum is my favorite.
Building inside me when I
Oh.
realized what kind of music it was. The jingle of an ice cream truck. Before I could do anything, something clicked softly against the glass of my bedroom window. I instantly connected the dots. Someone was throwing rocks at my window. That had to be what had woken me up. The music was way too quiet on its own. I sat frozen for a while, staring at the wall across from me. I kept telling myself to look, to just get up and check. But every time I started to move, my body locked up again. Eventually, I forced myself to do it. I crept toward the window and stood to the side of it for a second. On the count of 3, I peeled back the curtain in one fluid motion and looked. The man from earlier was standing in the middle of my front yard, right below my window, and on either side of him, holding his hands, were 2 small children, or at least they looked like children based on how short they were. I really couldn't tell on account of how dark it was. I didn't waste another second. I tried to ignore the pounding in my chest, stepped away from the window, and immediately went to wake up my dad. I had already dialed 911 by the time he went downstairs to have a look around. My dad's a pretty tough guy, so I figured he'd want to handle things himself. Unfortunately, that man had somehow slipped away in the few minutes it took us to get outside. The police arrived a while later. A few days went by and we never heard anything, and I eventually had to go back to school, but my parents promised me they'd be on high alert. That was almost a month ago, and luckily, my parents haven't told me about any strange occurrences since then. The reason I'm writing this now, though, is because my mom called me a few days ago. Apparently, there was a missing persons case that had just gone public in our hometown. 2 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, had vanished from a neighborhood about 30 minutes from where we lived. The moment she said it, my mind went straight back to that night, to those 2 small figures standing on either side of the man in my front yard. The whole thing honestly makes me sick. Why would that guy sit in my house for hours and throw rocks at my windows in the middle of the night?
Damn,
And
that's
why
fucked
even
up.
go to those lengths if he was involved in something as serious as a kidnapping? Maybe he was worried that I had somehow caught on to what he was doing, but if he had really taken those kids, wouldn't attention be the last thing he'd want? And then there's the kids
Some
themselves.
people are just sick
I
fucks.
wonder if they were already with him when I first saw the truck that morning, or were they somewhere else? I really can't stop thinking about it. The only explanation I can come up with is the type of person who'd kidnap a child doesn't think like normal people do,
No,
which
they're
is why that
disgusting
man would
pieces of
risk
shit.
getting caught just to freak me out. My mom followed up with the police to try and shed some light on the case and our possible connection to it. If anything ever happens, I will send an update.
Oh, man, I hope you don't have to. That's fucking disgusting, man. I really hope you don't have to send an update.
This happened last spring, about 9 months ago. I'm a sales associate for BMW, so my weeks are pretty busy. When I'm not at the dealership, I'm answering my phone. Because of all the phone work involved, sometimes I feel like I have more to do when I'm not at the dealership, as funny as that sounds. Because of the nature of my work, I pretty much have to answer my phone every time it rings, especially when it's an unknown caller. So, as you'd expect, I get a lot of scam calls, but I have no choice but to answer, just in case it's a client or an interested party. One night, sometime after 10 p.m., my phone started ringing. It was a number my phone didn't recognize. Normally, I would have picked up without thinking, but this time I was already in bed halfway through winding down. Something about how late it was just made me let it ring out. They didn't leave a voicemail. I figured if it was important, they'd leave one.
Yeah.
But a few minutes later, the same number called again. I sat up and answered it. I was a little irritated, but I still tried to keep my voice polite, just in case it was someone serious. At first, all I heard was static, just this thick, uneven fuzz. I was about to hang up when I caught something underneath it. A voice. I held the phone closer and listened. It was my voice. I was 100% sure of it. That actually made me freeze up a little bit. After a few seconds, I realized it was more than just a recording of my voice. It was a conversation I'd had earlier that day with a client. Just standard stuff, pricing, availability, setting up a test drive. Nothing sensitive, but it was definitely real. It was definitely my voice. I still don't know if it was the right decision, but I instantly hung up the phone. I sat there for a while, just staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. I wasn't panicking, but I definitely wasn't calm either. The best way I can describe what I was feeling was a mix of confusion and unease. My first thought was that maybe it was the client I had talked to earlier. Maybe he had accidentally called me while trying to play back the call or record it for his own notes. I really don't know. It felt like a stretch, but it was the only explanation that didn't immediately spiral into something worse. That didn't really explain why the number was unknown instead of the number he had called from earlier, but it was the best I could come up with. The next morning, I decided to call him back just for my own sanity. He answered right away and seemed totally normal, friendly even. But when I brought up the call from the night before, he had no idea what I was talking about. He sounded genuinely confused. I apologized for the mix-up and hung up, and for whatever reason, I believed him. The rest of the day was normal. I had a few appointments, followed up with some leads, nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't think too much about the call from the night before, but later that night, around the same time, I got another call.
Different
The
conversation.
number wasn't saved in my phone again, but it was different from the number that had called me the night before. This time, I answered it immediately. Exactly what I was dreading happened. It was another static-heavy recording of a conversation I had that day with a client. A different client. A whole different conversation entirely. I hung up again without saying anything. That night was when it really started getting to me, because now it felt intentional, and I noticed something else. The recording didn't include the client's voice.
Just you.
It was only me talking,
Like they were
a one-sided call.
There.
I started wondering if someone had been listening in on my conversations and recording me somehow. I didn't sleep very well that night, as I couldn't stop thinking about it, but I didn't know what to do. I never thought I was a paranoid person, but the next week of my life proved me
Anyone could be a paranoid person whenever certain instances happen and there's like no reasonable explanation on why it's happening. Your brain can go to some fucked up places, bruh. We all get a little paranoid.
wrong. Every night for a week, the same thing would happen. I'd get a call from a random number and would listen to a staticky recording of a conversation I'd had that day. I started recording the calls myself. I can't even tell you why. I just thought it was the smart thing to do. By the third or fourth night, it started to wear on me. Not just in a creepy, this is weird kind of way. I mean, it started to actually mess with my head. I couldn't relax, I couldn't think. I'd catch myself looking out the window every few minutes, like someone might be standing out there watching me. I started triple locking my front door. Then I started leaving a light on in every room at night. At one point, I even moved a chair in front of my bedroom door. Looking back, it's really hard for me to explain any of these decisions, but my mind was in a very different place during that period. Anytime my phone rang, even during the day, I'd step outside and answer it from the safety of my car, where I could see every angle around me. It sounds crazy now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At one point, I even brought it up with the police. I felt ridiculous doing it, but I figured if someone was monitoring me, I had to at least make some kind of report.
Yeah.
The officer I spoke to was polite enough, but I could tell right away they didn't take it seriously. He said they could try looking into the numbers, but unless there was a direct threat or evidence of harassment, there wasn't much they could do. I don't know if they actually tried to trace the calls or just filed it away and forgot about it.
Probably
Either
the
way,
latter.
it didn't help. If anything, it made me feel more alone in it. A few days later, though, the calls suddenly stopped. That week of obsessively checking my surroundings and answering calls from my car must have deterred whoever was harassing me. Part of me wanted to believe it was over, but I couldn't relax. If anything, the sudden absence of contact actually caused me to spiral even further into paranoia. My mom is schizophrenic, so I always figured I was predisposed to developing some kind of mental condition, but it was literally happening right before my very eyes. I was becoming one of those reclusive people who think the entire world is spying on them. I ended up getting a brand new personal phone number. It was a massive headache. Switching numbers meant having to reestablish contact with clients, update everything linked to my phone, and risk missing out on people trying to get in touch with me, but I did it anyway.
That sucks.
I couldn't shake the feeling that my old number had been compromised somehow.
Oh,
After a few more days of radio silence,
bro.
the thing I was dreading happened. One night after work, I got another call.
Are you fucking
It
serious?
was exactly like the ones before it. I kept my cool, and instead of remaining silent and hanging up, I actually spoke. I said something along the lines of, "I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but if it's money you want, I've got it." I went on to say that I'd happily pay to be left alone. I gave the person my address and said I'd be willing to meet. And then, for the first time, there was an actual voice on the other end. It sounded like they were using a voice changer. And all they said was, 11 o'clock, before hanging up. I know what you're thinking. Why the hell would I volunteer my address like that? Honestly, I can't answer that question. I was acting irrationally,
stupid,
I
but
know
I
that.
get it.
But it's impossible for me to explain exactly how my mind was working during that time, so I'm not even gonna bother. The next 4 days were the most traumatic and stressful moments of my life. I'm not sure how much I can even type out without getting too graphic, but here goes. I have a handgun in my house for personal safety. I grabbed it from my room, loaded it, and sat at my kitchen table and waited. I can't even begin to explain all the thoughts that were bouncing around in my head as I sat there. I contemplated a lot of things in those 4 hours. I'd go as far as to say that had it not been for sheer chance, I might not be typing this out right now. Just thinking about that night gives me a sickening feeling. 11 p.m. came and went, and no one showed up. There's no telling what I would have done had they actually showed up. I ended up sleeping at the kitchen table with the gun in my hand. It was by far the worst night of my life.
The American
But
way.
thankfully, that was the end of it. I never got another mysterious call again. But that didn't change the fact that that person had done irreparable damage to my mental state. It took me a lot of therapy and time off work to recover fully, and I still get chills thinking about how easily I was almost driven to complete madness.
That is fucked.
I will never have an explanation for what happened to me. I have no idea how that person recorded my conversations or who they even were. I have no idea why they harassed me or why they stopped for that matter. I've since moved out of that house, but there's not much I can do beyond that. If anything, this experience has made me a lot more fearful of the future. I can't help but think that I'm destined to end up just like my mom. Hopefully getting this out there will help me heal in some way.
Fuck. I mean, in that situation, is he just losing his mind like his mommy, or like, is this actually going on? Is it just something he's making up in his head? Man, I would not want to be in that motherfucker's position. I would not want to be in his shoes. I would not want to walk a mile in his shoes. Whatever way you want to look at it. Because it's like, did my mind just make it up? Am I turning into my mom? Or is this really happening? What the fuck? Damn, Mr. Nightmare. Fuck my spring. All in its ass. Really enjoyed today's video, though. Sorry. Sorry. Really enjoyed today's video, though. It was a good one. Damn, Mr. Nightmare. If you all enjoyed today's video as much as I did, please go down there and leave a thumbs up. It really does help the channel grow. While you're down there, if you want, going over, slap that subscribe button, become part of the B5 Nation. We do some crazy stuff here. If you want to know when that crazy stuff happens, ding that bell and turn on all notifications. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Damn. I'd move. I would never own a phone again. Everything be landline, bruh.